Now, our afternoon plenary session speaker is Dr. Deborah Baness King. Deborah Baness King has served as the Dean of Academic Success at Triton College since 2006. She has over 20 years of experience in education and has worked extensively in the fields of academic and student support, program assessment and evaluation, grant management, equity, inclusion, and college readiness. Dr. King currently serves as a member of the peer review course for the Higher Learning Commission and is adjunct faculty in the Higher Education Organizational Change Graduate Program in Benedictine University. Dr. Baness King holds a Ph.D. in education from the University of New Mexico with an emphasis in language, literacy, and sociocultural studies. As Dr. Gill said earlier, if you want to be a doctor, this is the room to be in because a lot of them in here, all right? So without further ado, let's give a round of applause to Dr. Baness King.
So first I want to say I'm very, very humbled and honored to be in this space. And I want to acknowledge the fact that I know by occupying this space, I keep somebody else from occupying this space that may be more appropriate in your eyes, may have more of a connection to your experiences. So I come to this space knowing that I have to do justice for taking this space, and I have to leave you with something that you can that resonates with you and that you can take with you to not only build your own knowledge, but also to feel more powerful in your space. So that's where I'm going to start. That's okay. So today I want to talk about just space, okay? The way I view things around me and the way I view my place. Is that too loud? I'm a very loud speaker. The way I view myself and the way I view my role in the world and in my space is to be a space creator. Okay? I know I have access to space that other people don't. I know that, that in order to get space, you have to make space. And so if no one is making space for other people, then that space is always going to be limited, and we can't exist in limited space. So in order to do that, we need to figure out how we define our own space first. It starts with us. Who are we? How do we define our space? How do we move about our space on a day-to-day basis? The second thing we need to talk about is, what are those spaces? There are spaces that welcome us and there are spaces that don't. There are spaces that were designed for us and there are spaces that aren't. And we need to have an honest conversation about that. And then we also need to talk about, how do we create space for others? How do we collectively create space so that it's not a limited access and it's not something that we fight over, okay? So in order to do that, I need to tell you a little bit about myself and how I define my space. Again, I said earlier that I feel like I have committed myself and I feel like it is my responsibility truly and wholeheartedly to be a space creator for others, okay? First and foremost, I am a white female. I own that, I know that, I acknowledge that, and I acknowledge all the privileges that are packed behind that. And I understand that in that, if I fail to recognize that and I fail to acknowledge that, then I fail to create space for others. Others that have a very different journey than I have. But I am able to impact other people's journeys by who I am and what I do. So first, I'm a wife. And I say I'm a wife first. I love my kids. I don't put them first. I put my husband first. My husband has been with me for over 20 years. You can clap to that. That's okay. And I would expect him to do the same. I would expect him to put me first, too. We've known each other longer than we've known our kids. My husband and I have been together for 20 years. We've been married for 16. We are a blended family as a whole. And we did not always have support as a couple. And so when you don't have support in something, you look to people who are going to be your support system. He and I are each other's support system. He is the first person I go to when I struggle with something. He's the first person I go to do a gut check about something that I did. Did I do this right? I didn't mean to, and I think maybe I did something that I shouldn't have done. How do I navigate that? He does the same thing with me. He has to put me in check a lot and say, hey, look, it's not as easy for me to be in this space with you as it is for you to be in this space with me. And that fluctuates between the two of us, and that's why I put him first, because he's the person who grounds me in things. He knows me, he knows my intentions, and he's not afraid to tell me when I step out of line. Second are my kids. This is an older picture of my kids. My husband reminded me last night that I forgot the age of my kids. That is such a terrible thing to say, but when you kind of lock them in your head at a certain age, and as they get older, I get a little bit more afraid of losing touch with them and kind of being obsolete in their lives. But I do have 4 children. My oldest child is 28. I put her at 25 last night. Somehow I lost 3 years, but she's 28. She's the one that's doing the peace sign. My son, who is the next oldest, is 25. My daughter, to the right of my son, is 22, and my youngest is 14. All of my children do not share the background that I have. They are not, none of my children are white. Most of my children are biracial. My oldest daughter is African American. My 2 middle children are Latino and black, and my youngest son is biracial, white and black. And I will tell you that they are the craziest bunch of kids you can ever meet. If you want to have a good time, hang out with them. Like they are a moving party. They're fun. They're exciting. They're extremely intelligent, and they just know how to live life. And they've taught us a lot about how to just live life. I'm also a grandmother. It's my grandson, Javon. He's 6 years old. Being a grandmother is fabulous, okay? Isn't it fabulous? You get to, so it's kind of hard because my 14-year-old still lives with us. When my grandson comes over, my son says, well, I don't get to do that. No, because I have to fix you after they leave. Right? I don't have to fix my grandson. He can come, he can have as much sugar as he wants, he can do whatever he wants. My husband does all kinds of crazy stuff with him. And then I get to send him home, which is great. He doesn't sleep at my house. I don't care. I don't have to deal with him the next day. Send him home, right? So my son struggles with that a little bit because he gets a little jealousy. But having a grandchild is absolutely one of the best things that's ever happened. I'm also a sister. I have 2 older siblings. I grew up in a house of only sisters. I don't know what it's like to have a brother. Don't know if I want to know what it's like to have a brother. I live in a house now with just my 14-year-old and my husband, and I'm getting a little insight to that world and not so keen on that. So my sisters and I are 2 years apart, roughly, and that was my foundation for how I had relationships with women. It is still to this day the rock of my relationships with other women. I trust them. I look to them for advice. We fight. We love. We make up. We do all of those things, but together, through it all, we're always together, which is the most important thing. I'm also a daughter. I have, both my parents are still living. They've been married for almost 53 years. I came from a foundation where family and marriage and the sanctity of the core family was everything. We did everything together. If one of us went, we all went. And I also came from parents that, although we lived in a very rural area of Illinois, taught me to look outside of who I was around and taught me to look outside of my comfort zone to connect with people and to seek opportunities. And I'm also an auntie, a cousin, a sister-in-law, a daughter-in-law, a niece, and these are my people. This is how I identify myself. But I can't ignore the fact that I'm also an educator, I'm also a professional, I'm also obligated to make space for other people and help them find their space in the world. But these are my people. This is how I define myself. And at the base of everything, regardless if I had an education or what career I was in, this is what I go back to. This is my foundation. And, as is said by Aretha Franklin, they are absolutely all I need to get by. So now, in order for us to have a conversation about space, in order for us to move forward in terms of talking about the spaces that we exist in, we need to figure out who we all are in this room. On your table, you have a packet of information, or not information, it's a packet of worksheets. You should have some pens. Does everybody have pens? Yes. Okay, so I'm going to ask that you take some time to fill out this worksheet. It's a very basic worksheet. It doesn't have any directions. Your goal at this point individually is just to write down, who are you? okay? Sometimes specifically as women, we don't get the opportunity and the luxury to self-reflect. And this is your chance to self-reflect. And please know that what I have described as mine is not yours. And it shouldn't be yours. And it shouldn't be your neighbors, and yours shouldn't be your neighbors. We are all very unique, and we all define ourselves in very different ways. So there is no right or wrong. Okay, so what I'm going to ask is part of defining your space is sharing who you are with others. Okay? You can't define your space if you're not going to claim your space. And by claiming your space, you're giving yourself the power and the control to tell people who you are versus having people make assumptions about who you are. And so while I know it is a very vulnerable process, and I clearly will not call on anybody, I'm asking that somebody have the courage and be brave enough to stand up and share who they are with the group. Go ahead.
So I am a mother, I am capable, I am unique, I am a friend, I am dependable, I am a follower, I am a believer, I am a wife, I am bold, I am on a path, and I am me.
Great, that's fabulous. Can you also tell us your name, please?
Latifah.
Great, thank you. I want to just give a quick little side note. Why is it important that you stand when you claim who you are?
You're taking authority.
Because it what?
Taking authority.
You're taking authority. You're taking your place. And owning your space and claiming your space is about making sure you're present and people know that you're there. That's why it's important. Anybody else?
I'll go. All right, my name is Catherine. I'm the administrative assistant in student life. And I am strong, I am bold, I am a leader, I am a God-fearing, praying woman, I am beautiful, I am fearfully and wonderfully made, I am a fighter, I am a motivational speaker and a minister, I am my sister's keeper, I am a mother, I am a wife. Now there's a reason why I put a mother and a wife last, because I'm a mother of 6. Just so people know, yes. And so, thank you. So raising my children, we sometimes as mothers put ourselves last. And within these last couple of years, I'm learning how to put myself first. And I have a wonderful husband, he's great. But I'm learning how to perfect their inner me. So I'm not just a wife, I'm not just a mother. And in order to be a good wife, and to be a good mother, I first must pour into myself and teach myself, train myself to be a better me so that I can be great for them. So I am a wife and a mother, and that's the last thing, but it's the first thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and I appreciate you saying that. And what I will say, and I'm looking over here only because there's an age difference, and not that I'm trying to classify you into any certain age, but I think that what you will find over your lifetime, first of all, your space changes, and how you define your space changes as you get older. And for me, as I got a little further on in my career, those things shifted for me. It wasn't always my husband and my kids first, and I'll be honest in saying that. But now I'm at a point in my life where I have the luxury of doing that. And I've accomplished some things that were non-negotiables for me as a mother, as a wife, as a person in my family that had to come first in order for me to be able to put other people first. So I appreciate you saying that because that is incredibly valuable. Anybody else?
So my name is Izzy Hollingsworth, and I am a daughter, a partner. I am a teacher, a student, a creator. I am a mother to an adorable little cat. I am a confident woman. I am a motivator. I am a leader. I am a protagonist, and I am a feminist.
Thank you. Give her a round of applause. Anybody else?
My name is Takila, and I put that I am a mother, I am a fiance, I am a woman, I am a Black woman in America, I am a student, I am a friend, I am a nurturer, I am a descendant of greatness, I am intelligent, I am beautiful, and I am strong.
Thank you. Great.
I am a mother, sister, partner, writer, dreamer, procrastinator, poet, artist, resale shopper, MC, loner, and a grandmother.
Fabulous. Grandmother clubs are the best. Great, thank you. And I think that, and does anybody else want to share? I definitely don't want to limit opportunities, please.
I am an inspirational leader. I am a strong, whole woman. I am an athlete. I am zany, fun, and loving. I am a nurturer. I'm a beautiful enigma unleashed. I am a community activist, a singer, a sister, a friend, and I am unapologetically me.
Fabulous. Thank you. Anybody else? I think it's important too that when we share our stories and when we hear other people's stories and what their space is, that we acknowledge that we see them. We see you in your space. We acknowledge you in your space. You belong in your space. Your space is yours to do what you need to do with it in order to make your journey come true. So I see you. I appreciate you for sharing, and keep going. Your space is going to evolve. It's going to grow. It's going to shrink sometimes, depending on where you're at in your life and how you feel about yourself. And as we start to talk, you'll see why it's important, how space will play into that morphing of your growth and your the way that you grow and you come back to certain things in your space. So in this exercise, we talked about creating your space. But it's not enough just to create your space. You can't create your space and expect that things are going to come to you if your space is not safe. If you are not safe to exist in your space, if you are not safe to navigate spaces the way you need to navigate spaces to get where you want to go, it's not enough. And we need to have a conversation about difficult spaces. Okay? We know, you know much more than I do, that there are spaces that are created for us and there are spaces that are not. There are spaces that are designed for certain people and spaces that are designed to exclude others. We know that. That is a fact. That is what we have experienced. Again, your experiences are much different than mine because there are other aspects of your lives that I do not have to facilitate. And we know that difficult spaces exist because it's a way to retain power. Okay? It's a way to acknowledge that people are threatened by our existence, they're threatened by our presence, and so they create difficult spaces so we will leave. That is the purpose of it. Okay? So what is a difficult space? A difficult space is any space where you don't feel welcome, any space that you are marginalized, any space that you or somebody is trying to push you out of, any space that is an area where you don't feel you have the room to grow, you don't feel you have the room to move, you feel that the space that you have been given is a luxury or has been handed to you versus your just inherent right to be there. Okay? Those are difficult spaces. And I'm sure all of us have stories about times that we've been in difficult spaces. Again, I do believe in sharing stories as a way to get others to share theirs, and I will tell you, my stories probably pale in comparison to some of the stories that you have. But I do feel it's important for me to put myself out there if I'm asking you to do that. And my story is one of the first time I remember being in a difficult space. I mentioned I grew up in a very small town in Illinois, and I grew up in the late 70s, early 80s. I was in middle school. And at the time, Title IX was just kind of getting some momentum, and Title IX back in those days was really more focused on gender equity in regards to how resources were utilized. And one of those places that was a real big focus was athletics. So it was a time where there was a conversation about why do we have boys baseball but we don't have girls softball. So that was kind of the context of this story. And my school, for whatever reason, had an individual who was a proponent of Title IX, came into the classroom and said, hey, it's time for winter sports. We have cheerleading and we have basketball. You can sign up for whatever you want. Boys can sign up for cheerleading, girls can sign up for basketball. I like sports. I come from a sports background. I've always liked sports. I was a tomboy boy growing up. I thought nothing of it. I put my name on the basketball list thinking other girls were going to do the same. Nobody else did the same. So I was literally the only girl on an all-boys basketball team for 3 years while I was going through puberty. Difficult space, right? So as I was 12, 13, and 14, I navigated this space where clearly I wasn't wanted. Clearly I didn't feel like I belonged. I would be put into situations where, in preparation for the game, and when it was my time to go into the locker room, they would tell me, oh yeah, we're ready, come on in, everybody's dressed. And I would walk in and people wouldn't be dressed. And it was done to embarrass me. I would go to practice, and at that time, the way they split up teams for practice is one team had shirts and one team had skins. And skins meant you took off your shirt. And the coach would put me on the skins team to embarrass me. Over the years, what I learned about maintaining that space, and I only was able to maintain that space because of the support of some key individuals at the school, of my parents, and of an assistant coach who kept pushing me, don't leave, you got this, don't leave. And what I learned over those 3 years in my reflection was, it wasn't my teammates. Somehow I expected it from the other kids that I was around. Kids are mean, they were conditioned that way, but what always stuck with me was the coach. The coach was a grown man who intentionally made that space so incredibly difficult for me at a time where he knew he had a daughter my age. He knew what that age meant in terms of your gender identity and how you navigate all those things around that age of middle school. And what I came to find out was, as the years passed, it was less about me and more about him trying to protect the space overall. He was going to give me the space I was in, but he was not going to allow anybody else to take that space too. He was not going to allow any other female to feel like it would be an okay situation for them to come on the team. So I was tolerated, but he made sure he made it known and seen by other girls that being a girl on the boys' basketball team was going to be difficult. And nobody else came out for the team. And that was intentional. And that's what difficult spaces are about. What I learned from that, because I do feel that we all have to learn from these types of experiences, what I learned from that was that it shaped the way I looked at male spaces very distinctly. And I didn't come to realize that until later on in my life. But when I approach male spaces, I approach male spaces like, bring it on. You cannot possibly do more to me than was done to me when I was 12 years old. So bring it on. I know the jokes you're going to tell. I know the things that you're going to try to do, and you are not going to get to me. And I walk into spaces saying, you better think about what you're going to do to me, because I'm not going to allow it to happen. This is my space, and I'm claiming it, whether you like it or not. So with that, your second sheet that you have is about difficult spaces. Now, we all experience different levels of difficult spaces. And I know that some of you, your experiences with difficult spaces are extremely emotional. I don't expect you to share these at the table if you don't want to. This is a safe space, and if you want to share, we would more than welcome it, but it is not a requirement, okay? But is there anybody who was interested in sharing their difficult space?
Hi, I'm Nishan Johnson. My difficult space is always being, well, it used to be feeling like I was limited because of my skin color. I know growing up a lot of the times, I don't like this. Growing up a lot of the times, I always felt, I was told that because I'm dark skinned, I can't do this, because I'm dark skinned, I can't do that, or certain people wouldn't want to be with me, or certain people wouldn't want to be around me because I was dark skinned. So that's my difficult space. The way that I kind of got out of that difficult space is because I can't change my skin color, and I'm not looking to change my skin color anymore. So it's either that you're going to accept the fact that I'm dark skinned, and if I'm for you, and if I'm not, I'm not. Simple as that.
Similarly, starting in 6th grade up until I graduated high school, there were many times that I was like the only Black person in my class. And I definitely felt a lot of pressure with that. A lot of like just performance anxiety and trying to feeling like I had to prove myself and things like that. And just noticing the microaggressions and the way my classmates, when we had group projects, they didn't want to participate with me and things like that. And so eventually I just had to realize like that's them and that speaks more towards their character than it does mine. And I had to just refuse to internalize that and realize that, you know, I don't have to prove anything to anyone and that I deserve to be around people that see my value no matter what I look like.
Thank you. Anyone else want to share in the back? Sure.
Okay. Ooh, that's really loud. One thing that I guess for time's sake, I'll just kind of clarify something that I've learned through, going through difficult spaces and navigating them is that a lot of the times you'll find that you'll be surprised. And I say surprised in the sense that those individuals and those people who you thought were going to be by your side and stick it out with you and help support you through those times, sometimes don't do that. And they sometimes end up making it worse for you. And then, on the other end, you are surprised that some people who you thought would leave and be very unsupportive ended up being the ones that actually stayed by your side and tried to help you through it. And one of those particular experiences that I had was I was 18 when I had my first child, and I was out of wedlock, and it was obviously unplanned. And so my boyfriend, who is now my husband, I thought he was going to be, we had only been together for less than a year. Like, that's how fast it happened. And I thought for sure he was going to be like, no, and leave. And I thought my parents were going to be like, honey, we'll get through it. It happens. It was the complete opposite on both ends. My parents kicked me out of the house because they felt it was completely irresponsible and inappropriate that I did that. Whereas my now husband stayed with me through everything, and his family took me in like one of their own, and we now have 3 beautiful children together and have been married for 8 years. So it's really great. So that surprise in itself sometimes works out in your favor, sometimes.
So thank you for sharing. I want to be someone who tells you it is not okay the way you're treated in difficult spaces. It is wrong. It is not acceptable. We shouldn't have to think that this is just the way people are and we have to move forward. It's not okay. Okay? And we may not always have control over difficult spaces, but I do think we can create and make space in difficult spaces where at least we feel supported and we feel some unity and some power in those situations. So I want to make sure that we say it is not okay. We cannot just accept it and move on. It's not okay. Okay? So now that we know there's difficult spaces, there's welcoming spaces, we have space, we define our own space. Sometimes the issue becomes when you're put in a difficult space, or you're able to break into a difficult space, there is intentionality behind limiting the amount of space that you're given. Okay? It's intentional. But we have an obligation to make sure that we create space for others. And we're going to talk a little bit about how we do that. And I will argue, for those gentlemen who are in the room, I'm sorry, you are going to be a little bit of the victim of circumstance on this one. But I argue that fundamentally as women, we are taught not to take up space. We are taught to only take what we need. That's it. And for a lot of different reasons and a lot of different circumstances. And I'm going to show you a visual of this. This is the way we're taught to sit. Legs crossed, elbows in, taking up as little space as possible. This is how we compare to men. okay? She gets up. Only somebody her size can get in. He gets up. He can make room for 2 or 3 people. We are inherently taught to take up as little space as possible. And what I would challenge you to do is take up space like men. And I'm going to give you an example. I need a volunteer. This is what we do to each other. Whoever gets up first, it's fine. I don't know you. What's your name? Queen. Queen. Come on over, Queen. This is what happens. If I'm given space in a difficult, if I'm given a location in a difficult space, Queen, I want you to stand just in that square, okay? If Queen is going to make space for somebody else, we think of it as, I have to give up something to give something to somebody else, okay? Can I get another volunteer? You volunteered. Do you guys know each other? Yeah. Okay, so what I'm going to tell you, Brooke, share your space with Queen. Share the space with Queen. Queen has space, I need you to share it with her. Okay, you can stop. Was that comfortable? No. Maybe comfortable if you have a sibling that you're doing that with, get a little closer, best friend. Are you going to do that with somebody you don't know? No. Okay. Now, both of you, I'm going to ask you, take space like a man. Make yourself big as you can possibly make yourself. Now, can I have a volunteer? Come on up. Can you please, ladies, do you mind sharing your space? I can't remember your name, I'm sorry. With Catherine? And Catherine, I'm going to tell you, when you take your space, the way in which you take your space is up to you. You're not limited on the amount of space you can take, but you have to share with them. They're going to let you into your circle. But the way in which you position yourself in the space is up to you. Okay. Do you see what's happening? Are we taking away from somebody else to give somebody else space? Or are we just creating more space for ourselves? Men do this all the time. You can get down. I'm sorry. I don't want you to fall. You can keep the chairs there. You can sit if you want to. How many of you have ever been? So when I was in college, I had some friends who were football players. Best people in the world to go to crowded parties with, because they would do the football. We would call it the football shuffle, right? Those of us who weren't, I'm big now, but those of us who were smaller at the time would get on the inside of the football shuffle, and they would create space. And before we knew it, we were right in the center of the party. And guess what we got to do? Because we created space, the more people we wanted to bring into our space, the further they would step out. And nobody said anything. Nobody asked. People just adjusted. That's what men do. And men then make it think like they're giving us something. And it's not just men, right? I would say predominantly white men do that the most, right? Because we all have a piece of that. But that's what we fail to do. Instead, sometimes we make it a competition. Or we make it only those people who we're going to be comfortable around. And if we do that, we're not giving space to people who need it. We're not bringing in people who would not otherwise have that space to occupy. We all don't have other female friends to bring us in. We all don't have other people who have trailblazed a way for us that can bring us in. We need to put ourselves and situate ourselves in a way that allows as many people into the circle as possible. Because what ends up happening is the circle becomes ours. They become the outliers. And all too often, again, it becomes a struggle over this, right? We have 3 women of color competing for the same job. We have, and that may be the only woman of color in the whole organization. And we're competing 3 on top of each other for 1 position. That's what's been created. And then when we get into those roles, we forget that there were 2 other women that got iced out on it. We don't think about going back and saying to those women, hey, I really want you on my team. You clearly have something to offer. How can I make space for you? If it's not here, someplace else. But we're in this together, because otherwise, the men are going to continue to say, you can stand in this square, exist in this square, but don't come out of that square. Because they're the decision makers right now. Okay, and especially white men. And we can't allow that to continue to happen. Thank you, ladies. You can sit down. Please, a round of applause for the ladies. So what I will tell you is, going back and trying to create a little bit of full circle on this, is that you don't have to like the person that you bring into your circle. It's not about being a best friend. It's about creating opportunities for each other so that when we are looking for somebody that we can resonate with, there's somebody there that we can tap into. It's not about who's your cousin or who's your person that you were in class with. It's about creating that opportunity for everybody. And if they don't want to be in that space, they won't be in that space. It's not their space, that they just don't want to be there. That's the control that we have. And we've got to get beyond trying to control the spaces that we're in and allow people to control the spaces that they want to come into and allowing that opportunity to happen. And for me, that's just the bottom line for respect. We have to respect each other. We have to respect the journey that everybody is taking and know that just because we may have gotten to the place in our life where we're satisfied, there are so many other people that are not. And it's our role to not just sit back and say, I made it, but to really start to create that space for others. You have another worksheet we're not going to have time for, but I do ask you to reflect on how you can commit to creating space for other people. And what I would like to say is, one of the lessons that I've learned over my career and my role in creating space for other people to be successful is that the unanticipated consequence for that is I've created circles of support for myself with people that I would have never even anticipated being friends with or even just being colleagues with. And that's the beauty of it, because having circles of friends that can support you in different situations, no matter who they are, makes you change how you perceive things, and it impacts you in a profound way. And the only way we are going to continue to move forward, not only as women, but as a society and how we view women of color, is to make sure that we are constantly moving forward in circles, constantly moving forward in spaces, because we have to make our own change. Nobody is going to make it for us. Okay, so thank you for your time. I hope you learned something. I hope I gave you what I promised to give you, and I appreciate you allowing me to occupy this space today. Thank you.
Let's give Dr. Baness King a round of applause. Wasn't that phenomenal? Learn about spacing and things of that nature.